All right, welcome back to The Real Deal with Empire. I'm your host, Ali Fawaz, and this is Season 2, Episode 2. Of course, this is the podcast where we don't just talk about transactions, it's about transformation. And we're going to continue on with this theme this season. And this being second episode, we have a special guest. It's actually a returning guest, somebody that we had on last season, and we got amazing feedback. It was a very informative episode. We have on the show again today Cindy Immonen, who is from Fidelity National Financial, and she is the Vice President Senior State Agency Representative with Fidelity. And again, excited to have her on the show today. It's an important topic we're going to cover this episode. Actually, we're going to cover probably a couple of topics on this episode, but there's one thing in particular that we're going to kick off with that I think is going to be hitting the industry and making quite the impact later on this year. So it has to do with regulation that's coming down, and I'm not going to take away her thunder. I'm going to let her talk about it and how this is going to impact the entire industry, frankly. Cindy, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks, Ali. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, so on a federal level, the Financial Criminal Enforcement Network, FinCEN, has put in place a regulation that is going to affect the real estate world as well as the title world and certain lenders, actually. So what this is called is FinCEN's Anti-Money Laundering Residential Real Estate Reports.
It sounds scary.
It is scary too. Under our Bank Secrecy Act that was passed, there was a lot of regulations that were put into the banking regulations to really crack down and try and watch for anti-money laundering and counterfeiting, of course, and part of our terrorism programs. So in 88, what happened was they amended it, and in this federal regulation, they added, quote unquote, persons involved in real estate closings and settlements. They were included in the Anti-Drug Abuse Act with that rulemaking. So this goes back in time when Reagan was president, and Nancy Reagan had a lot of pins made that said, just say no to drugs.
I remember that.
Yes. So they included the real estate world way back then. Well, it really lied dormant until last year. FinCEN really started taking a look at the success that they had had with what was called a geographic targeting order. So probably 5 or 6 years ago, not in Michigan, but in some municipalities and counties throughout the United States, like New York, Miami, Chicago, LA, just to name a few.
Yep, sounds like big markets.
Yes, very big markets. They passed a regulation that if a cash transaction happened, that the settlement agent, title agent, would need to report that transaction. And that was in, again, these specific geographic targeting areas under the GTO. And so FinCEN took a look at the success that they've had with tracking down the anti-money, the money laundering that was happening. And, that's what they're enforcing is no money laundering. So they had success. And so they created then a final residential real estate rule. And this is going to require settlement agents and attorneys to report specific information. In fact, 111 pieces of information.
Yeah, 111 data points or pieces of information for each transaction.
Yes.
But this is transactions, specifically cash transactions.
Sort of, and we'll get into that detail. But yeah, believe it or not, 111 data pieces from the transaction. So let's talk about, like you said, what transactions, okay? Because today, when you walk into a bank, not every transaction is subject to bank secrecy, right? So if you walked into a bank with more than $10,000 in cash, then you'll be escorted over to a manager and you'll be asked to fill out a report.
Yep.
So we have no dollar limits on this residential real estate rule. So first of all, it is only residential transactions. This is not in the commercial world.
Okay.
At least not yet. We'll have to see what happens in the future. So the high level part of this transaction is if it is cash, if it is a land contract, or if it is with a lender that is not reporting in under NMLS. So that type of lender would be like a private money lender, or what we might also call a hard money lender.
Yep.
And a lot of times that hard money lender is in the commercial world, but they have crossed over to the residential world to help investors. So the other component, so that's the first component of the transaction. The second component is who is the buyer? If the buyer is any type of corporation, an S Corp, a B Corp, any type of corporation, any type of partnership, so a limited partnership, a general partnership, a professional partnership, if the buyer is an LLC, a sole member LLC, a multi-member LLC, doesn't matter, any type of LLC. And then the last type of entity would be a trust, and that would be any type of trust. So if it was just my personal trust, just for me, or if it was my family trust, or let's say my great-grandmother did very well in the market and had lots of money and I was a beneficiary of her trust, it would also include that type of trust. A land trust, any type of trust. So if the buyer is any one of those four, and if they're paying cash or a land contract or going through a hard money lender, private lender, again, a lender that's not reporting through NMLS.
Right.
Barring any type of exemptions, because there are a few exemptions to this rule, it basically is going to be considered reportable.
Gotcha. So it sounds like they're definitely casting a wide net.
A big net over that. So first of all, it's identifying, is this going to be a reportable transaction? Then reviewing one of the several exemptions, which is going to be dicey. So that's the next issue with this ruling. Then the next part is, let's say it's deemed to be reportable. It's then gathering those 111 pieces of data. You see, it's going to have to be gathered before the closing date, before the closing table. And a lot of us in the real estate world, we push a lot of stuff to the closing date.
Yeah.
We say, okay, the seller's going to bring that original death certificate in on the closing date, but here's a copy. The buyer's going to bring in the original C of O on the closing date, and here's possibly a copy or the estimated date when it will be done. So a lot of things do get pushed until the closing date, and the closer then is responsible for picking up these several pieces of information. With this rule, because there's so much information that's going to need to be gathered, the title agencies are being trained and coached to not wait until the closing day. Well, why would that be? If even one of the pieces of information is not there, it's not considered closed.
Okay.
And with a cash transaction, you don't have people delaying it except for the missing data. And so we really don't want to wait for that data after. You can't deem the closing to be closed and get that information afterwards. There are some very severe penalties with this law. Again, it is federal, number one.
Yep.
There is a monetary dollar amount, a pretty high one, that goes with violating this regulation, as well as jail time.
Oh.
Jail time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty serious.
Pretty serious. So, again, the title agents are being coached and trained to gather all of this information ahead of time. So what is some of this information? Well, part of it is not just the buyer that we've been talking about. It's also going to be the title agency is going to need to gather information from the seller. So as a real estate agent, and you see that this transaction could be reportable, you may want to tell the seller that they're going to have to disclose some information on this report, and it's going to go to this department, this agency up in Washington, FinCEN. And some sellers might say, well, who is that? And again, it's the Financial Criminal Enforcement Network. And so that's kind of scary. But again, it's an added layer that the seller might have not have been expecting, right?
Yeah.
And their personal information having to go. Then it's telling, of course, the buyer that it's a reportable transaction, and the information that they're going to have to provide the title company is way more than they've ever had to supply today. Okay? So one of the big training mechanisms that we're giving our title companies is for them to ask that the buyer, one of these four entities, go out to the FinCEN website and register themselves under the guidelines, regulations of the Corporate Transparency Act. Now, that act was actually to be in place as of January 1st. And there were some court cases going on, and so it got delayed to about March 21st. And then once it went live, FinCEN then about a week later said, well, we're not going to, be as serious about it, and we're going to back down to only foreign entities have to register under the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act.
Okay.
So a lot of businesses before that point this year, they did go out to the FinCEN site and they did register their LLC, their partnership, their corporation, because it's been talked about for about 2 to 3 years that this is coming. Mm-hmm. You need to do this. You need to do this. Get with an attorney. Have them help you. So some entities have done it. Trusts never had to do it. And trust was one of those 4 buyers.
Yeah.
And trust can do it because they are an entity. So one of the things that the title company will ask the real estate agent is to ask the buyer, has this entity gone out to FinCEN and created their FinCEN identification ID under the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act?
Now, what if the buyer is not part of an LLC or anything like this? It's just an individual buyer.
Then it's exempt.
Making cash purchase.
Yep. So if it's an individual person or multiple individuals, it's not a reportable transaction. Okay.
But as long as it fits the criteria of a corporation, an LLC, one of those, then it does fit it. Okay.
Exactly. And so it would be much easier if that entity has the FinCEN ID because the information that FinCEN wants on the report is being asked under the Clear Transparency Act. The Clear Transparency Act wants an entity to drill all the way down to the benefiting owner's interest, the BOI. Okay, so basically what they're looking for is who is this benefiting person of this entity. Okay, so to make it really simple, I'm a sole member LLC and it's benefiting me. Cindy Lou's Hair Salon, and I'm buying a new spot that, I'm going to have 4 or 5 barbers and have a hair salon. All pretty much simple. Yep. Not all LLCs are simple, and not all corporations and partnerships are simple. Especially, professional ones could be a group of attorneys, a group of doctors, a group of dentists, and maybe this professional partnership elects an attorney to represent them and so forth. And so who is that benefiting owner interest? The FinCEN wants it to go all the way down to that benefiting party, multiple parties, multiple people, but basically all the way down to that individual. So by having a FinCEN ID for that entity, it will make filling out those 111 data points much easier. Okay? Included in that 111 data points is assuming the entity has not done a FinCEN ID. So when you go out to do your FinCEN ID, so let's say you and I own this multi-member LLC, we have to give our personal information. Social security number, birth date, where we've lived, a lot, some very personal information that a buyer, an LLC buyer, doesn't always want to give out to people, right? That's why they created this LLC, this partnership, this corporation, this trust, right? Was to protect sometimes their identity or, again, their information. And now they're being asked to provide that before the closing happens. Right. So the real estate agent really needs to tee this up to the buyer, maybe even before the purchase agreement is put together, and have a conversation of who do you really want to have buying. The decision could be made that maybe it's best to just put it in the individual's name, the buyer be the individual's, then it's not reportable. Or if you're going to put it in the entity, if the entity is buying, did you get a FinCEN ID number? No? Okay, take the time and go do that, because each partner needs to go out there and get their ID. Each member. You can't do one that covers the entire LLC. Right, you do one for the LLC and then one for each individual. Each member of the LLC. For partners, each partner of the partnership, corporation, it's going to be those controlling parties, your president, your vice president, your secretary, your treasurer. It could even mean X amount of shareholders. It could be the board of the corporation. So they're drilling really down to, again, that benefiting owner's interest of that corporation. And that takes a little bit of time. You can't get everyone on the table to, go and give their personal information. Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a little bit of herding cats. Exactly. And so that's where, as a real estate agent, knowing that this entity is going to want to purchase, get that legwork done ahead of time. Yes, I know that the CTA kind of got kicked to the side. It's not being enforced. It's all set up out there on the FinCEN site. And I do get that some people don't want to register their entity, because they feel that the government doesn't need to know about them or collect this data. And I personally get it. But now the real estate world has been put in this situation where it's going to have to be collected either by the title company. All those little data points are going to have to get collected, or you are a little bit more secure by going out there and doing it yourself, possibly, and then giving your FinCEN ID number to the title company. If you set up your FinCEN ID, is it set it up once and
you're good.
Yeah.
So then your next transaction,
Yeah.
it's already there. You don't have to go through this process anymore. You're registered. You have your ID.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, if you are an individual that has ownership in a trust, ownership in an LLC, partnership, a corporation, you would have your Social Security number, you're going to have your passport ID number, your known traveler's ID number, you're going to have your FinCEN ID number. So you get the pleasure of having another ID that's very important to keep secure.
Yes. So this really impacts many different types of people. It definitely see immediate impact on those who are investors in
Exactly.
companies, right? And fix and flips or renting and there's a big swath of people, especially in Michigan, the Michigan market, because we know that it's big in this market right now. In fact, we did an episode where we're talking about how people are coming into the state just to invest in properties here in Michigan.
Oh, exactly. You have people that are living out of country. They've never even come and stood on U.S. soil, and they are buying property, houses, and they're hiring the contractors to come in and fluff it up and get it rented, and collecting, that investors collecting income on it.
Yeah.
And that is a great thing to have our residential housing fixed up for people to rent. It's a great need out there in society. And it's going to make it more difficult, I think, for the investors community. They do rent a lot of times from these hard money lenders also instead of paying cash. So then you've got to collect the information from the lender. Yeah. And that's going to be tedious too.
So the lender also has to do their FinCEN ID. So not only
exactly
the buyer with the LLC as the investor, but also the hard money lender's information.
Yes. Or the private lender, there's sometimes private lenders, some of us are very lucky to win the big lotto, right? And then turn around and lend to people to invest in our residential housing world. And so, yes, they will have to definitely they have to get looped in. That private and high, the hard money lender, those, the fintech world lending, a lot of them are not in the NMLS world under all those regulations, and they purposely don't want to be. They find it very lucrative to be able to lend outside of those regulations. Yeah. And the buyers do find them, and those people can borrow the money. It is a higher interest rate, but the regulations aren't there. And so it's not really a little, it's a lot of different types of lending that happens. Sure. And so now they're getting looped in to be reported. How fun is that?
Very fun. And I was just looking at, so you had mentioned some of the penalties earlier.
Yes.
I was just looking up the penalties, and they are quite serious. We're talking, looks like, for negligent violations, per violation, up to $1,394. If there's a pattern of negligence, then the additional civil penalties would be up to $108,000. If it was willful violations, now we're talking imprisonment of up to 5 years.
Yeah.
And a criminal fine of up to $250,000 or both.
Yeah.
So this is no joke. They're really trying to set a precedent here. Hopefully they're not going to make I'm sure they're going to make an example of somebody. That's usually how these things operate. When they first introduce something, they're waiting for somebody to trip up. Exactly.
So that's the thing. The real estate agent, the real estate broker, that lender, if there's a lender involved, and most certainly the title company, because here in Michigan, the title agent is the settlement agent. And I don't think they want to go to jail.
No.
But and that's going to be really hard when they're telling you, the real estate agent, I can't set a closing date until I get all this info, and they're having troubles getting all the info from their buyer or from the seller or from that lender. And it's not going to be fun. Now, this all starts December 1.
Okay.
So we have been actively training our title agents that we authorize. We had one of our first of 3 webinars on Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, so just yesterday. We've gotten lots of questions.
I'm sure.
We're asking title agents to take a look at, how many transactions are you doing that would fit into this bucket of needing to be reported. The not so great news is FinCEN has not given us their form yet, so that's not fun. And
when you say the form, that's the form with the 111 or data points that we still don't know what they are.
Exactly.
So how do we prep? We don't know yet.
Right.
Okay.
So we do know some stuff by reading the regulation and all that. So we do know that part a bit. We do know that they want a lot more information about where's that buyer's money coming from.
Yeah.
So typically a cash deal, the buyer's money is coming in via wire. So we're like, okay, we received the wire. Well, now we're going to have to collect information about that wire. What bank account did it come from? Who owns that bank account? What was the Fed wiring number? So we're going to be collecting a lot more data about the money coming into the title company that we don't do today.
Right.
And so that's going to be tedious. And so we've got some vendors that are working out there to see if they can gather that info when they work with a buyer to safely wire into a title company. Again, the fraud part is out there. So we're working on that. The software providers to the title industry world is also working on building data points for them to fill in and hopefully be able to spit out this report. What we're hoping is that the report can be sent in electronically. We already submit 1099s to the IRS electronically. So we're hoping that can happen on the title side, talking to FinCEN. Also, this report has to be submitted 30 to 45 days after closing. So it's right away after closing that the report's going to have to be done. So that's the other hesitancy about not doing the closing and then, we'll follow up for the info.
Yeah. I can see how that could be problematic.
Yeah. So that's problematic. And so last week I was in Washington, D.C., in fact, for ALTA, the American Land Title Association, and we went around and talked with our representatives and our senators. And we were asking them to go to FinCEN. We're asking them to put in a dollar amount. So, maybe we don't have to report unless the dollar amount was $100,000 or above.
Right.
Right now, there's no dollar amount. So if I bought a house from you for $1,
that would even have to be reported.
Right, unless it fell under one of the exemptions. And so that's not fun. So we're asking for that. We're asking for them to push the effective date to maybe next December. That would be nice. Let's kick the can down the road. We're also asking them to take a look at the 111 data points to say, hey, the buyer's wiring us the money in, then why do you want us to collect this data points about that money? Why don't you go look at the Federal Reserve? Because all of our money that's wired goes through the Federal Reserve. So why can't you look to them instead of to us to gather that data? So we're continuously pounding on them to cut back because they haven't provided us yet as an industry all that we need to do this as of yet.
Yeah.
So we're really hoping that we can get somewhere with the Department of Financial Criminal Enforcement Network with this law, this regulation, this guideline.
Well, It sounds like there's still a lot of work ahead of us as an industry.
There is.
It would be nice if they do decide to delay it a little bit further,
It
or
would be.
maybe do a complete 180 and say, you know what, we don't need this anymore.
Exactly. And you know what, dear God, if they did it after the date, oh my gosh, I will be so bummed after all this work and effort. But at the same time, I would be very happy.
Yeah, I hear that. So it's definitely some important information. I'm glad that we're having the conversation now, early on, so that nobody's surprised when this happens later on. And I'm sure there's going to continue be more information coming out. And as it does, we definitely would love to have you back again.
Yes.
So continue
and I would love to
sharing
do
with us.
that. Exactly. And keep you updated with possibly any changes. Like I said, we're fighting for some changes.
Yeah.
So we are already preparing ourselves to do a CE accredited class to the real estate agents. So not only do you get to learn about this regulation, but you also get some CE and hopefully some good fun
Everybody
food.
loves that.
Yeah.
And some good food, yes.
That's what I'm hoping.
So what's happening a little bit more locally? What's
Yes.
happening in Michigan? Are there fun things to share there?
There is some fun things to share. Of course, today, right now, Lansing is working on our budgets diligently right now. There's been a lot of indecisiveness, not agreeing. Our lawmakers aren't, just all happy-go-lucky and getting along up there right now. Just to let you know, no. So they're kind of bickering about the budget right now. We're hoping that we get a budget by July for the schools, being K-12 schools, charter schools, and our public universities and colleges. So they might pass something just for the schools, and then their due date is October. So hopefully that all gets worked out. There's just a lot of discrepancy, a lot of arguing about the budget. Yeah. But in the meantime, whatever they can get passed, hopefully, they're up there doing their jobs for us, representing us, and getting some bills passed. One of the bills that was in the works in Lansing last year that flowed through to this year is our land division bill. Mm-hmm. So when we have a giant chunk of land, we could either divide it by our subdivision laws, our Plat Act. Yep. We could divide it under our condominium laws, and divide up that chunk of land that way. The other way is our Land Division Act, and that allows you currently to divide that land into 4 parcels. Okay. So there was some developers, and we all know that we have a housing shortage out there, not just in Michigan, but across the United States. And there was a developer that went to their local lawmaker. I don't know if it was a senator or a representative, but said, hey, it would be really nice if I could take this chunk of land and, just divide it into 20 parcels. And so the lawmakers in Lansing went to work back and forth, and they have agreed over last year to this year to amend our bill to have a chunk of land divided into 10 parcels. The Michigan Land Title Association had asked to have language added that a survey be done and recorded. We were not successful with having that added to the bill. So just as it stands today, to divide it into 4 parcels, you do not have to do a survey and have it recorded. You will be able to divide it into 10 parent parcels of land, chunks of land. Now, the municipality and county level should be and probably will be asking you to submit a survey from a professional surveyor. They will not ask for it to be recorded. And then when you go to sell those 10 parcels, coming from the one chunk of parcel of land down to the 10, a title insurance agent or title insurance underwriter will be asking for that survey as well. And of course, it's not recorded at that moment either. Mm-hmm. So it looks that will be passing sooner than later. Again, as I said, they've been trying to get that bill passed last year, and now they've been heavily working on it this year. So look for that to be passing. It recently passed the House of Representatives, actually April 16th, and it's sitting over in the Senate. So we're not sure when it will move, but we are, looking for that.
And the thought behind how this is going to be beneficial for us here in Michigan is, it sounds like essentially we'll be able to parse out more properties or land for development to build on and so on, and knowing that there's a shortage. Any other benefits, any other things we need to consider with this, or is that really the biggest benefit to it?
Right. The benefit is, that it's going to be easier, I guess, to either create 2 to 10 parcels out of it. Nice. Right. So right now it's sitting in the Michigan Senate Committee of Local Government, where it's waiting for a hearing. And once that's done, then it will get deferred to the governor if it passes. My hunch is that it will pass. It's bipartisan.
It is bipartisan. No, I was just going to ask, is there anybody who's, any detractors on this that are saying, no, here's why we shouldn't do this?
No. Okay. No. So, we're looking forward to be passing. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
One other thing I would love to talk to you about, since we started the episode talking about financial crimes enforcement network, right? And, cue in the dramatic music.
Yeah.
But speaking of that kind of thing, fraud is something that's prevalent. It's out there. It happens, especially when it comes to property. Something I think I'd love to address and have our audience hear is when it comes to fraud or even poor underwriting, how much of that do you see? How impactful is that in the Michigan market? Or is it just a minuscule thing, not a big deal?
Yeah. No, it's a really big deal. We do see it often in several different levels. So the first one that we see probably on a weekly basis that we hear of, and we are one of 11 underwriters in Michigan. Okay. And we don't underwrite every single title agency either. Right. So we're not seeing it all, but we see it weekly, if not twice a week. And that is the seller impersonation. So what happens again is a fraudster is impersonating the seller to the real estate agent. Real estate agent is very convinced. They go out there, they put a sign on the property, they get a buyer for cash right away. Again, it's hard to find properties to buy, even a house. If it's vacant land or a house, it's hard to find them, to find the right one. And so it's sold right away, and it's a hurry up and get it closed. The real estate agent only talks with this quote unquote seller, right, the imposter, by email. They don't talk to them on the phone. They don't meet with them in person. They give the whole story that they're in another state or out of country, and it's all on an up and up. So we have told title agents, and so beware of this, real estate community and lending community, is to have the seller and the buyer identify themselves through a vendor. So it's ID verification. So what the title agency is doing is they are reaching out to the seller directly, the contact that the real estate agent has, a cell phone number possibly, or again, only an email address. The title agency reaches out to them via the email addresses and asks them to go to this company and take a picture of their driver's license or state ID front and back. It could be also a passport front and back. And then also to take their cell phone and do a selfie. So they have to take their cell phone and skim it over their face frontwards and backwards, maybe even up and down. Wow. Kind of thing. And that vendor then validates that they are really working with Cindy Immonen. Okay, so they take that identification and they go to the public record part of it and the private record part of it. So with a driver's license, they will go to the Michigan Department of Motor Vehicles. They will go to whatever state's Department of Motor Vehicles and see your record. They will match your facial identification through the scan with what is of record. And then they will tell the title agency, are they really working with Cindy Immonen?
Wow.
So we're encouraging title agencies to do this at the order entry time period so that they're not putting a lot of money into the transaction and finding out at closing that we're really not working with Cindy Immonen, the seller. Okay? ALTA, the American Land Title Association, they have best practices that all underwriters and ALTA asks title agents to follow. There's 7 pillars. It's a lot of in-depth information for the title agency to abide to. One of the newest updates that's coming by the end of the year is to have buyers and sellers go through an identity verification through a vendor at the closing table. Fake IDs are so good today.
So people showing up to the closing with a fake ID, and it's just,
and a human cannot figure out that it's fake. Now, I have been a closer since back to '88, and we were trained how to identify if a driver's license or something was fake, and I've seen fake IDs. We've also had blue lights in the copier room to see if the ID is fake or not. You can go to fakeid.com and spend some money, more than a 19-year-old would, to go to the bar as a 21-year-old and have some really good ID to buy and sell property as a fraudster today. It's very sad.
It really is.
It's very sad.
And for those of you who are not in the industry, maybe you're just a passionate person that works around the industry. What Cindy's talking about here with the fraudster, we're talking about them identifying a house that's not theirs. In fact, oftentimes it might be an Airbnb or it might be a rental property that just happens to be sitting vacant. Nobody's in it. So that they'll take down the address and basically pretend like it's their house, and they'll go to and they'll find an agent and tell them, hey, I want to list my house for sale, knowing full well it's not obviously their house. And so this is what we're talking about that's actually happening within the industry, and it's running rampant, frankly.
It really is. So don't be afraid to protect yourself better. I'm giving advice to all my family and friends and my colleagues out there. Freeze your credit reports. There's 3 bureaus. Go out there and freeze your credit reports. You can freeze those for free. Lock down your IRS site. Have a code to have your tax returns submitted, because a fraudster will submit tax returns before you do and get your tax return money back. My husband and I just had to validate ourselves before we can get our tax return money back. And again, it's going through that process, that identity process, to validate you are who you are. We have to be a lot more engaged with our personal information and keep it locked down. Not just a credit monitoring thing, not just LifeLock, but really take the energy and time to secure your personal information.
I definitely like the idea of freezing your credit reporting.
Yes.
Right? With the 3 major players in the space. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Oh.
So.
Well.
Yeah.
Cindy, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on top of that.
I mean, that is just why title agents are asking for this information.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised that they're asking you to communicate who the buyer is, how you've communicated with the buyer, how have you communicated with the seller at the order entry part, so that this information can be done. Let the title company handle this so that you're not handling personal information. You don't want to lose it or risk it being lost unknowingly and having your consumer in a pickle. And again, wiring the funds, let the title company handle all of that. So that everything is handled securely and it's not on your liability as a real estate agent.
What if, let's say you are a real estate agent in the industry. How should you go about choosing a title company to work with? Like, are there certain criteria that an agent should really be looking for? And maybe there's best practices around that. What would your advice be there?
Yeah. You would want to have a good relationship with your title company, know the title company owners, know the title company's agency manager, go to lunch with them, know their practices, know that they know Alta best practices, know who their underwriters are, know that they won't do just every single transaction.
Right.
A title agency that does just every single transaction is probably not a good thing.
Right.
Because there's a lot of not good transactions out there.
I think that's something that the industry needs to do a better job of. And when I say the industry, I think as agents themselves, they think that they're doing their clients a service by hurrying a process and perhaps, rushing the process and saying, no, that should be fine. Just run it. Why are you finding all these issues?
Right.
Well, really what they're doing is they're actually finding these issues so they don't come back to bite your client later. So really they're actually looking out for your client. And that's what you actually do want. You want that from a title agency. Yes. You want the title company to be thorough, cross their T's, dot their I's, versus let's just hurry the process. No, you're finding silly things, and that's, to me, those are red flags.
Yes, and if there's too many red flags, then it's just not a good deal.
Yeah. And just know when it's a bad deal.
Yeah. Yep.
That's wonderful news.
Yeah, good question.
So, Cindy, it's always a pleasure having you on the show, and every time we talk, I feel like I'm learning something new.
Yes, that's fun.
Whether it's about the title world or just even something that's going to make me smarter in the industry. So Thank you for coming back.
Yes,
joining us here for season 2. We're looking forward to having you again as a staple on the podcast, we hope.
Sure.
So definitely appreciate your time and your perspective. To everyone who's tuned in, thank you guys for spending a part of your day with us. If you've got value from today's episode, take the time and leave us a review, some feedback, and follow us on whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. You can find us there and tell everybody about us. Until next time, we'll see you then.